Don't you know how to polish shoes properly? This is a gala, not some cheap cafeteria. The man's voice rang out, loud enough to make heads turn in the corner of the ballroom. Rachel bowed her head, her hand trembling as it touched the expensive Italian leather shoes stained with mud. No one knew that she was the owner of this magnificent mansion. No one knew that her heart was screaming with humiliation. Yet instead of walking away or fighting back, she chose to remain silent because she wanted to find out how many people here would reveal their true colors when they believed you were nothing more than a nameless server. Don't you know how to polish shoes properly? This is a gala, not some cheap cafeteria. The man's voice rang out, loud enough to make heads turn in the corner of the ballroom. Rachel bowed her head. Her hand trembled as it touched the expensive Italian leather shoes caked with mud. No one realized that the woman kneeling in the server's uniform was actually the mistress of this magnificent mansion. The gala was being held at the Brantley estate, formerly owned by an old money family in Southampton, now the property of Rachel and Jasper Vaughn. But no one there knew that. Even less did they know that Rachel was Jasper's wife, a private real estate millionaire, renowned for both his wealth and his inaccessibility. She had chosen not to appear as the hostess. Not out of shame, but because she wanted to conduct an experiment, a daring yet necessary test. If she presented herself simply as a server, no title, no elaborate makeup, no air of privilege, how would those who called themselves the elite treat her? No one on the serving staff recognized her. She had arrived early, slipped in through the back door, donned the same uniform as everyone else, and pinned a fake name tag to her chest. No one questioned it. No one looked long enough to wonder. And that realization sent a chill down Rachel's spine. The guests began to arrive. One by one, they stepped in as though the entire mansion existed solely to cater to their presence. Greetings exchanged, polite smiles offered, all part of a well-rehearsed performance. Rachel moved among them silently, carrying her tray of drinks, averting her gaze, and simply observing. She saw the unspoken hierarchy, the Patek wristwatch wearer looking down on the Cartier wristwatch wearer, the private fund manager smirking at the mere broker, and they all assumed that a server was nothing to bother with. Rachel was treated like air. Hands reached for champagne glasses without so much as a glance her way. Caste-tinged jokes crackled in the air just before her ears. A middle-aged woman, her voice as sweet as honey, cautioned, "Be careful with that tray. You look prone to spilling everything." She forced a polite smile, but inside each cutting remark sank in deeper. She had prepared for this. She knew there would be disdain, prying looks, yet she hadn't expected it to feel so familiar. It reminded her of the days she worked at the bakery, when customers ordered her around, scolded her, and looked down on her, all because of the uniform she wore. Rachel was not one to seize the spotlight. Jasper usually played the public-facing role. She preferred working quietly behind the scenes, doing small acts of genuine purpose. She chose a simple life not for lack of options, but because she knew the true value of what she held. And that was precisely why tonight's experiment mattered all the more. She needed to know, when people have no reason to respect you, do they still respect your humanity? Rachel gripped the edge of her silver tray. She inhaled deeply. Tonight she was not Jasper Vaughn's wife. She was not the mansion's mistress. She was nobody important. And that was exactly why things were about to become more interesting than ever. Wait a moment. I have a small favor to ask. Please tap the like button if you enjoy inspirational stories. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you live. It always warms my heart to see people from all around the world come together to share a single meaningful moment.
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
She passed through them, and they passed right through her. No one glanced up. No one could recall the color of her eyes. Rachel moved silently, as if gravity in this mansion did not apply to people like her. the one holding the champagne tray with both hands, standing motionless like a shadow cast upon the lavish wall. She heard snippets of conversation like sharp little knives. Stocks climbing, which politician had just been toppled, whose daughter was headed to Yale. Those stories swept past her as though she were smoke in a sealed room. Everyone breathing, yet no one noticing. She had once believed she was prepared not to be hurt, that tonight was merely an experiment, but now living it, beneath eyes that pierced skin like cold glass, she realized the worst pain was not in being ordered around, but in being treated as though she did not exist. An elderly couple drifted by. The wife pointed at Rachel's tray without looking. The husband reached out for a glass and then turned away to continue his conversation, as though her hand were nothing more than a platform. Those who had once sent flowers to this mansion to curry favor with Jasper now stood before her without so much as a smile. Rachel had imagined this moment might strike her as amusing, but it did not. It made her feel hollow. She resumed her walk through the grand hall, the tips of her server's shoes tapping lightly on the stone floor. Then she froze. Before her stood a middle-aged man, tall with closely cropped gray hair and a smoldering cigar stub in his hand. His expensive Italian leather shoes were splattered with wet mud, no doubt from the garden outside. He looked straight at her, neither nodding nor greeting. His gaze dropped, then he tilted his chin toward his shoes, a simple, frosty gesture. He reached out, took a nearby napkin from the buffet table, and held it out to her as though offering a cleaning rag to a servant. Everything inside Rachel sank. Her shoulders remained steady around the tray, but her heart felt as if it were being squeezed. She did not know which was worse, that he assumed she would comply, or that he was utterly certain she wouldn't dare refuse. She knelt, not for him, but for herself, for the promise she had repeated many times before coming, to truly see people's character when they believed you had nothing left to lose. The napkin touched the cold mud on his shoe. She wiped it away in even, gentle strokes. The laughter around her grew hushed, then dissipated like wind stilled. That man was Wesley Carrington, a renowned economic journalist known for calling to weed out weakness from the marketplace. His Rolex gleamed under the lights. The corner of his mouth held an old self-satisfaction, as if this scene were entirely justified. Rachel knew his record inside out. She was the one who had approved his name on the guest list. Had she spoken the truth then, everything would have stopped. But she did not. She needed more than one shock. She needed living proof of something larger than herself. She rose when his shoes were spotless. She handed back the napkin with both hands. Wesley did not thank her. He merely turned and walked away as though he had just used a service. And in that instant, Rachel felt something crack within her. Not her pride, but her faith. Faith that people do have decency, even if only a trace when they believe no one is watching. Everything inside Rachel sank. Her shoulders remained steady around the tray, but her heart felt as if it were being squeezed. She did not know which was worse, that he assumed she would comply, or that he was utterly certain she wouldn't dare refuse. She knelt, not for him, but for herself, for the promise she had repeated many times before coming, to truly see people's character when they believed you had nothing left to lose. The napkin touched the cold mud on his shoe. She wiped it away in even, gentle strokes. The laughter around her grew hushed, then dissipated like wind stilled. That man was Wesley Carrington, a renowned economic journalist known for calling to weed out weakness from the marketplace. His Rolex gleamed under the lights. The corner of his mouth held an old self-satisfaction, as if this scene were entirely justified. Rachel knew his record inside out. She was the one who had approved his name on the guest list. Had she spoken the truth then, everything would have stopped. But she did not. She needed more than one shock. She needed living proof of something larger than herself. She rose when his shoes were spotless. She handed back the napkin with both hands. Wesley did not thank her. He merely turned and walked away as though he had just used a service. And in that instant, Rachel felt something crack within her. Not her pride, but her faith. Faith that people do have decency, even if only a trace when they believe no one is watching. Everything happened so fast that no one had time to react. A few clicks of shoes echoed down the main corridor, and the conversation in the ballroom fell silent for a heartbeat. No one expected the newcomer to be Jasper Vaughn. He arrived earlier than planned. His flight from Chicago touched down an hour ahead of schedule, and he decided not to send a heads-up message. Jasper was not in the habit of making surprise appearances, but tonight something unnameable had driven him back. He stepped into the grand hall wearing a light gray suit, his stride brisk yet unhurried. His expression was calm, eyes carefully scanning the room. Guests began to recognize him. A few heads inclined in greeting, a couple of polite smiles. Yet he did not return any acknowledgments. Jasper's gaze swept the room, and then it fixed. Not far away, amidst the swirling waltz, Rachel stood by a side buffet table, a napkin in her hand, her face tilted downward. A smudge of crumbs dotted the cloth, the remnants of a chilled pastry a guest had complained was below standard. Jasper looked at his wife. He took in her unfamiliar black uniform. He noticed her hair pulled neatly into a low bun, indistinguishable from any other staff member. In that instant, he didn't fully understand what was happening, only that something was profoundly wrong. He moved swiftly toward her. "Rachel?" She started as the entire room went still upon hearing his voice. Not loud, but unmistakably clear. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her hand remained clutching the napkin. Her eyes had not yet risen to meet his. Then, with no further explanation needed, Jasper looked around, and his question burst forth like a blade slicing through the party's fragile veneer. "Who told my wife to polish shoes in her own home?" His tone was no longer gentle. It had hardened to steel and echoed across the floor like a forceful blow that shook the entire space. The low murmurs subsided. Trace paused mid-pass. The words "my wife" struck like a slap to anyone who had looked Rachel up and down with contempt. Wesley Carrington's face went pale. Genevieve Halston froze mid-step, her cocktail glass wavering as though she herself were unsteady. No one needed further confirmation. Fragments of memory snapped together in each mind, how they had looked at her, spoken of her, given her orders, and in an instant they understood. Rachel was not a server. She was the hostess, the wife of the man who held the keys to the very estate they stood on. Those who had laughed moments ago now averted their gazes from the couple standing side by side. Some stepped back. Others covered their mouths, not from shock, but shame. Rachel said nothing. Yet her hands, once seen as mere tools, were now firmly held by Jasper. No additional words were necessary, no lowered voices, no pleas for understanding. In that moment, everything was unmistakably clear. The price of their contempt had materialized. No one needed to out her in public. A single sentence was enough to overturn the balance of power, and the aftershocks of that truth were only just beginning to spread. No one expected a trial to break out in the middle of a gala, but it had begun, and the sole judge in the room at that moment was Jasper Vaughn. After his question ripped through the atmosphere like thunder across a clear sky, silence grew so heavy that one could hear the ice cubes clinking in their cocktails. Jasper still held Rachel's hand, his gaze no longer angry but composed. The calm of someone who has already made a decision. He took a single step toward the crowd, trying to stay upright under the weight of their unmasked shame. "We do not choose partners solely on balance sheets," Jasper spoke deliberately and clearly, as if addressing the entire world. "We also choose them by how they treat those they believe they have no reason to respect." A hush followed his words, then all eyes turned to Wesley Carrington, who still hadn't recovered from the earlier shock. Jasper did not look at him. He simply let another statement fall, as though it had been considered long ago. The $30 million investment agreement between us, consider it terminated. Wesley did not and could not respond. No nod, no shake of the head, not even the slightest curl of his lips. He stood there like a stone statue amid a rising tide. Then Jasper turned his head gently toward the event organizers, those who, barely an hour before, had hailed Genevieve as the pillar of their charitable fund. "And please inform the Board of Trustees," he continued in the same even tone, "that we cannot proceed with a representative who fails to uphold the organization's humanitarian values." There was no need to name names, everyone understood. Genevieve Halston had been struck from the list. The title she once flaunted before everyone was now an empty shell. Someone cleared their throats softly. Another took a hesitant step back. The murmurs that followed were no longer whispers but panic, because everyone began thinking about themselves. They no longer looked at Rachel. They looked at one another with suspicion, doubt, and fear. Rachel stood still. She did not gloat. She did not smile. Yet something inside her softened, not because Jasper had restored her dignity, but because he had forced others to confront themselves. No shouting, no threats, just one clear declaration, and a resolve so cold it cut through the room, was enough for Jasper to show that self-respect is not a commodity to be bartered. Unlike debates in boardrooms or negotiations behind closed doors, this silence was not an intermission. It was a verdict, and in that moment, Rachel realized what had hurt her most about the evening was not the humiliation, but the callousness that had become routine. And what Jasper had done was not merely defend her, but halt it from happening to anyone else. Footsteps receded in hushed retreat. A few guests slipped away in silence. Those who remained bowed their heads, as though re-examining who they were when no lights were shining on them. And those who had looked down on her only now began to understand cheap pride is always the most expensive price to pay. Rachel stood before the room where golden light still danced on the walls as if nothing had happened. But in truth, the room had changed color. Not the hue of the lamps, but the hue of awakening. She did not raise her voice. She did not call attention to herself. She simply gazed at those who once treated her as if she were air. Then, in a strangely calm tone, she spoke. "I am not angry because I have been underestimated. I am sad because I know there are millions out there who endure this every day without any way to speak up." No one stirred. Her words were not meant to threaten or hurt. They were simply the truth. And sometimes the truth is gentle enough that there is nowhere left to hide. Jasper said nothing further. He merely stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Rachel from behind. No words were exchanged, but the gesture conveyed everything a man could offer the woman he loves: trust, respect, and a willingness to stand by her side as she faced the world. After the gala, no one left in the same mood they arrived. The next morning, Rachel's inbox overflowed with messages, hundreds of apologies, from acquaintances and strangers alike, from guests who had once shot her suspicious glances, from those who had silently laughed when she knelt to polish someone else's shoes. Some offered more than apologies. They offered commitments. Some signed up as volunteers at food relief centers. Others wrote to join the charitable activities they had once dismissed as work for the unsuccessful. Small changes, yet real ones. And Rachel understood just one domino tipped in the right place could set the whole system in motion. Wesley Carrington never spoke out publicly, but the media did not remain silent. News of the gala spread quickly, and the clip of Jasper holding Rachel's hand in that hushed ballroom was shared millions of times. People began calling Wesley the silent kneeler, not because he himself had knelt, but because he had caused others to kneel under his pride. Genevieve did not appear at any event for weeks afterward. The press did not attack her harshly. They simply asked one question: "Do you remember the name of the person who served you that night?" That question rang out like a bell across the social elite. But not everyone was punished. In fact, many were given a chance to change. Rachel did not need them to repent. She simply needed them to see themselves, just as she had seen them from below. And for the most part, they did. One Sunday afternoon, when light filtered through the kitchen window, Rachel and Jasper sat across from each other with coffee in hand, just like any regular morning. There was no lavishness, only peace. Do you regret it? Jasper asked, looking at her over the rim of his cup. Letting you do that alone? Rachel shook her head and smiled softly. No, I regret that it had to happen, but I do not regret it. Because if no one stands up to do it, how many more will have to endure what I did? Jasper reached across and squeezed her hand, and Rachel knew they would not change the world with money. They would change it by choosing the right moment not to remain silent. Because true respect begins the moment you believe no one is watching. There are lessons not found in books, but in how people treat each other when they think no one is looking. Rachel's story is not just about hidden identity or an upended party. It is a reminder that dignity does not lie in status, but in how we choose to treat those who cannot benefit us. You may never have been made to kneel and polish someone's shoes, but have you ever felt dismissed, ignored, treated like you didn't exist? If you have, you are not alone by mom. And if you have ever shown kindness without reason, then you are the one making this world a better place. Thank you for following the story to its end. If it touched you, please leave a comment below. Have you experienced something similar? Don't forget to like, share with those who need this message, and subscribe so you won't miss more healing, moving, and profound stories like this. You deserve to be seen and to be respected. Always.